Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Chargers Analytics with Arjun. In this episode, we're going to be going over some special teams. I've been pretty active about it on Twitter, posting a lot of graphs, and I'm here to just really explain how bad the special teams were for the Chargers in 2020, and even just look at the special teams across the past decade for the Chargers. Now, I think it's important to note that in football, you have three components of play, right? You have offense, defense, and then special teams. But then when you rank each component and its importance to a team and winning, I think the rank should go offense, defense, and then special teams, right? So special teams has probably the lowest correlation with team wins. And this should come to note as no surprise, just because teams play upwards of 50 to 60 plays on offense and defense, while they may only see 10 to 20 special team snaps a game, right? So obviously with less snaps, it's going to have a lower impact on a team in winning. But I think it's also important to note that good special teams play is obviously, it will help a team, right? It won't hurt a team if you have good special teams play, good kicking, good punting. But really bad special teams plays like the Chargers had in 2020 has a bigger impact, whether it be positive or negative, than good special teams play does. So special teams impacts the game more if it is a detriment to a team rather than it being a positive or strength of the team, right? So you obviously want to have good special teams, but just know that it doesn't help the game as much as having a great offense or a great defense does. But having a really bad special teams can hurt a team more than help a team if they have a good special team. So I'm just going to show you a couple graphs that I found and I put together, just really explaining how bad the Chargers special teams was in 2020 and, for the entire decade. Okay, so this first graph that we're looking at is looking at the special teams EPA in 2020 for every team in the league. As we can see, the Chargers ranked last and brought by a pretty significant margin, right? Like the Jets had like a negative 0.22 EPA. The Chargers are about negative 0.33. Like they were almost a full 0.1 EPA below the Jets. And like I said, it's a detriment to the team because it's that bad. Like we all know how bad the Chargers special teams were in 2020. And when you match it and compare it with the rest of the league, I mean, it's mind-boggling how bad this unit was, right? And you can blame it on Anthony Lynn. You can put some of the blame on George Stewart, who was the special teams coordinator for, I think, like 10 to 11 games before Anthony Lynn made a change. You could also put some blame on Tom Telesco for not re-signing guys like Adrian Phillips and Derek Watt and Nick Dzubnar, who were all special teams guys, in 2018 and 2019, and not, finding guys in the draft. You should also put some of the faults on the players because they just didn't execute what they were supposed to. So obviously you can see the Chargers were the worst special teams in 2020 and by a pretty significant margin. Now, we all remember the 2018 season for the Chargers, right? Like that was the magical season, 12-4, made it to the playoffs, beat the Ravens. But, when we look at the special teams in 2018, the Chargers were 27th, right? Like we all remember how good Desmond King was that year in the return game, right? He had the big punt return for a touchdown versus the Steelers on Sunday Night Football. Everyone was getting hyped over that. Like this guy's an all-pro returner. I think he made the Pro Bowl as a special teams guy, right? And, the Chargers were decent that year. Michael Badgley was stellar after he took over for Caleb Sturgis, but they were still pretty low in 2018. And again, this is part of the Anthony Lynn era. And if you don't remember, Caleb Sturgis was absolutely horrific the first, I would say, like 7-8 weeks of the season when they had him. And, he did cost them, I would say, a lot of points when you factor in the kicking game. So now we move on to looking at the Chargers special teams in terms of EPA throughout the entire decade, right? So the blue dots represent the Chargers EPA for each year. So you can see it starts at 2010 and finishes in 2020. And I mean, if you just look, the Chargers had literally the worst special teams play of the entire decade. Since 2010, no team has had a worse special teams throughout an entire season than the Chargers did in 2020, which is absolutely horrific. Like this should not happen ever again. And I know Tom Telesco has made this a point, signing gunners like Ryan Smith, finding special teams guys like Larry Roundtree, and hopefully Nick Niemann in the draft. But I mean, if we just walk through the decade, the Chargers were the worst in 2010, right? Everyone remembers that graphic memeing the Chargers had the number one defense in 2010, the number one offense in 2010, and they had the worst special teams, and they finished 9-7. Like, how do you have the best offense and the best defense? Like, that is a hard thing to come by. The best offense and the best defense, yet you still miss the playoffs. And that's what I'm saying. Like, special teams being horrifically bad has a bigger impact than it being, really, really good. And so they had a couple of good years where they finished above, or where they had a positive EPA to finish the year in 2011, 2012, and 2013. But after 2013, I mean, everything just goes downhill. They didn't have another season with a positive EPA in this past decade. And when we look at the Anthony Lynn era, right, this is where they ranked. They had the second worst special teams in 2017. We all remember Young Hui Koo sucked it up to start the year. He got released, and now he's a stud in Atlanta. And then in 2018, we had the sixth worst special teams, and obviously part of that is put on Caleb Sturgis and his bad kicking to start the year. In 2019, we had the fourth worst special teams, and in 2020, we had the worst special teams of the year and of the decade. So you can, pause the video if you want to look at this in a little more in depth. But this again looks at the Chargers special teams throughout the entire decade. Now, we're going to look at the worst special teams performances of the past decade, by game. And, not surprisingly, the Chargers hold two of the worst 10 performances of the past decade, and they both came in 2020, right? So the worst special teams performance out of any team of any game in the past decade was the Chargers against the Patriots. I'm not going to go into depth on that. I was originally planning to put a few clips, but I'm going to save us some of that time because I'm sure none of us wants to watch Gunnar Olszewski take a punt return to the house and us getting blocked on a field goal at the end of the half and having 10 men on the field for multiple plays. No one wants to watch that. The Chargers had the worst special teams performance of the past decade against the Pats. And then they had a really bad performance against the Jags in week 7, which, is another bottom 10 performance. If you don't remember that game, I think it was the first drive of the second half where the punt got blocked for a touchdown. So that obviously is going to contribute to a very low negative EPA. And again, just a really bad job by Anthony Lynn. Probably one of the contributing factors to his dismissal as the Chargers head coach. Okay, sorry, let's get past. So this graph is looking at punt coverage and kickoff coverage EPA since 2010. Again, we're just looking at a whole decade's worth of data. So the y-axis, the vertical, is looking at the punt coverage EPA. So when the Chargers are punting and they're trying to tackle the returner, and then the x-axis is when they're kicking off, like after a touchdown, half, or after a field goal, right? So I think I put this in the caption. The Chargers held out of the bottom 4 punt coverage units since 2010 for every team. The Chargers hold 3 of those records. So 3 of the worst punt coverage units since 2010 belong to the Chargers, right? And I know guys like Adrian Phillips and Derek Watt were big special teams guys, but like the data shows that the Chargers still weren't that good. And a lot of it has to do with the gunners, right? I think the gunners are the main guys when you're looking at who's making the tackles, right? They need to get past the special teams blocks. Yeah, I'm not a big special teams guy. Like, I don't know the exact terminology, but I know the gunners have a very important job, and obviously they didn't execute it as well as they should have. And again, the Chargers had just horrific punt coverage and kickoff coverage units. Kickoff was a little bit better some years, like 2018. They had a above the average. So the red lines represent the average. The horizontal one is the average for punt coverage, and the vertical line is the average for kickoff coverage. So if you want to pause the screen and look at each year, feel free to do that. I'm going to move on to the next graph, which is looking at ERA adjusted EPA per punt over expected. I didn't create this graph. This is by @the_punt_runs on Twitter. He is a big special teams guy, and he likes to create graphs like this. So pretty much we're looking at who is the best and worst punters since 2018. Again, Ty Long, second worst punter. I think we all expected this for him to be in the bottom 5, just with how bad the special teams were for the Chargers. And not all the blame should be put on him, right? I think he was dealt a pretty bad hand with, the punt protection. Joshua Kelly, Steven Anderson, they did a pretty bad job of protecting him on punts. That's why a lot of his punts have gotten blocked. I know there were a couple of times where he had some bad snaps So not all of this is put on Tai Long, and this could also be represented for the actual punt coverage unit. But again, Tai Long, second worst punter since 2018. Now, the final graph I'm going to show you guys is, looking at the best and worst kickers since I think 2015. Yeah, kickers with at least 25 attempts since 2015. This is a little bit tough to read. I didn't, again, create this graph. This is at Pat Patriot or Paltriot on Twitter. So make sure to go check him out if you want to see really cool graphs like this. But I'll just run through where the Chargers kickers rank. So Caleb Sturgis, as expected, near the bottom. Right here is Caleb McLaughlin. If you don't remember, he was the guy we brought in when Michael Badgley got hurt in 2019. Ranks below average. Michael Badgley right below him. He had a really good 2018, 2019, and really, really bad 2020, especially with the longer field goals and some of the missed PATs that he had. And just to give the Chargers fans a slap in the face, Josh Lambo ranks 4th since 2015, and Younghoe Koo is way above average. So you can kind of see the Chargers have this trend of finding kickers that suck and playing them a lot, and then releasing kickers, and then them going to be stars in new locations, and them being some of the best kickers in the NFL when they join a new team. So that brings us to the end of this episode. Again, I just wanted to share some special teams graphs and data with you guys, because I know I haven't really brought it up a lot in some of my videos. And while it is an important part of the game and something that should be coached and taken accounted for, remember that bad special teams play has more of an impact than good special teams play. You just want to be at least average. Like, you don't want special teams to bring down your win total, but know that good special teams play won't increase your win total substantially. Like, having a Justin Tucker is very helpful, but it won't have as much of an impact as having a good offense and good defense does. So I hope that was super beneficial. A lot of these graphs I actually put on my Twitter at Arjun Menon 100. So make sure to go check that out if you want to look at these graphs more in depth, and make sure to comment any potential topics you guys want me to go over as the summer goes on. And with that, as always, bolts up.